Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to my very first Legends of Runeterra patch notes review. We have the open beta patch notes finally. A lot of it got leaked already anyway, but we'll go through it, see what else they have in store aside from what has already been leaked, and give you my opinion and my thoughts on it. So yeah, before we do that, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't yet. Turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future Legends of Runeterra content, since we can finally play in a couple of hours. Alright, so let's dive in. So first off, we have the video, we already know. Some mentions on the economy updates. I'm not gonna go over that stuff too much. I'll put the article in the description below for anyone that hasn't seen it yet and wants to read those sections. They're just like just some general stuff and not really part of what I want to review. We get ranked mode, a lot of stuff we already heard in the video. The friend feature, so basically they're just listing all the things they mentioned in the video already, but what we're really after are the card updates. So first off, the champion change. Anivia got a pretty big change. She went from 6 cost to 7 and from a 4-3 to a 2-4. And now she levels, in order to level up, you need to be enlightened, as opposed to before where you just basically have to kill her once, then she becomes an egg, and when she transforms back to Anivia again, she levels up. That means also the egg got a slight buff. The egg is now an 0-2 instead of an 0-1. But basically, if she turns into an egg before you are enlightened, then the egg is just gonna lie around until you are enlightened. The egg now says at the start of the round, if you're enlightened, transform me back into Anivia and level up. So basically, either she levels up without egg, just naturally once you hit enlightened, or the egg transforms back into Anivia and levels up once you hit enlightened. Until then, the egg is just gonna lie around exposed. Also, Anivia can block now, which makes kind of sense. She's more of a controlling kind of defensive champion, so it makes more sense this way. She's not kind of this reckless, aggressive champion. And that's basically what they said here. Based on internal playtesting and the first 2 preview patches, we found Anivia was in a pretty bad spot, especially when players went all in on building their decks to exploit her strength. Often she could be leveled up with almost no chance for the opponent to interact. With these changes, we are preserving her copy, sacrifice synergy while giving opponents a more consistent opportunity to react. Also, by reworking her to fit into an enlightened deck, we think she'll have a clearer role as a control ramp finisher. Finally, we heard feedback that Anivia's design felt a bit off thematically, particularly in ability to block, and blah 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 blah. So yeah, I think most of that makes a lot of sense. The thing is, like, between ramp and stuff like Islander, making her cheaper and giving her ephemeral, triggering right away, made her pretty easy to get out. The fact that she was a 4-3 made her a pretty good offensive threat that was very punishing to try and stop, because, you know, she just comes back for free. With the limited amount of removal, especially like non-combat, non-challenger removal, it is really hard to deal with her. So basically you need to kill her or challenge her and then kill the egg with a spell, or kill her with a spell and then kill the egg with challenge, which is really rough. And if the opponent does stuff like give her ephemeral, you often can't even do that that well, because she's just gonna transform right away. So yeah, the card was just really frustrating to play against and very like uninteractive, and also pretty powerful. And once she was leveled up, dealing 2 damage to your board just basically means she obliterates your entire board pretty quickly and kills you pretty quickly. So while it was not clear in general where these archetypes would stack up and stuff, the card itself and the way it was designed wasn't a very like interactive and healthy play pattern, I would say. And I think that's why it got changed. Now it's more of a like late game thing, and she's not that great until you hit the 10 mana enlightened, and gives you also more incentive to like play ramp in like a late game rampy control deck rather than try and cheat her out with Islander and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a lot more coherent and a lot less frustrating design, I would argue. Since before, independent of how top tier the card or decks with the card were, when you played against it, it was just not a very good experience. It was just pretty frustrating because most decks had barely any tools to manage her. So basically either you won fast enough that she didn't matter, or you just kind of got bullied and pushed around by Anivia a lot, which, yeah, it's just not the most fun and healthy, I guess, in terms of what they want for how their games go, which makes sense. Like, you want players to feel in control and be able to profitably interact with what your opponent is doing, and at least be realistically able to stop it, rather than just feel kind of helpless. And Anivia made you feel quite helpless a lot of the time, in my experience. Next we have Ezreal. That's kind of an interesting change. A lot of people were surprised by this, given that Ezreal and Ezreal decks and Piltover and Zaun were not particularly high tier, and people didn't think they were very good. And Piltover Zaun is like jockeying for worst region with Noxus, sort of. But once again, not every balance change is necessarily about like making something that is too good, broken, dominant into less dominant. Sometimes it's just like the specific experience when the card comes up rather than how much the card comes up. Like with Anivia, even if Anivia would not be top tier, every time you play against her and she comes up, even though the whole deck might not be that good, playing against the card specifically is just like an unfun play pattern. And I guess the thing with Ezreal is kind of the same thing. Even if the strategy he promotes is not that strong or that top tier, the card itself before was apparently just a bit too pushed, in the sense that when he happened, it was just too powerful. So you kind of end up in this situation with a card or a strategy that's either like not very good and not working out very well, and when it works out, it kind of works too well and doesn't create interesting and cool games. So it's like kind of bad in multiple ways. So they decided basically to only make one change. The Mystic Shot he gets once he's leveled up is not free anymore. It used to cost 0, and now it costs the regular 2 to make it slightly less dominant at taking over the game and at finishing your opponent, because Ezreal's level up was slightly too consistent at immediately ending games, so we wanted to add a bit more suspense to the is this it moment that comes when he hits level 2 without impacting his power level overall. Leaving the mana cost in his fleeting Mystic Shot won't impact him early, while keeping his late game spell slinging a true display of skill. So yeah, seems reasonable. Just makes the card a little less insane when he happens, and overall keeps the card intact. Basically what I was trying to elaborate on, the like frustrating, helpless kind of play pattern thing. Since once again, if Ezreal is leveled up, especially before you play him, you just play him, hit them, deal 2, get the Mystic Shot, deal another 4 for 0, so that's already like 6 damage, and then you have a couple of spells because you're probably like in the late turns and have a lot of mana, and then you just burn the opponent out pretty quickly and pretty consistently, and they just sit there and can't really do a whole lot. And this way it's less likely that they can do it in one turn, and it takes 2, so it gives the opponent some opportunity to react. And I think a lot of these changes are more aimed at making the game less highs and lows and more like back and forth interactive middle ground type things, which makes sense since you don't really want people to like do uninteractive or low interaction things at each other that either fall flat or just make your opponent feel helpless in a way. I guess that's sort of the thought, and I can see that making sense, even though Ezreal was not on the like radar for nerfs for anyone. But yeah, sometimes you just want to manage specific cards and like how they impact the play experience rather than where they stack on the like tier power level of archetypes in a competitive sense. Especially for like mid and lower level play, where these things are much more important than like how top tier competitive something is. Next, we have a very small change. Vladimir now counts for himself. So he, level up before was you've had 6 plus other allies survive damage, and now level up is you've had 6 plus allies survive damage. So he counts himself for his level up, so he levels up slightly easier and faster, which makes sense since, yeah, Vlad's level up progress was weirdly inconsistent across copies of himself. The small buff corrects that issue. So just a minor adjustment to make the card a bit more consistent in itself. Here's another slightly surprising change. Backside, so the level up of Tryndamere went from Overwhelm, Fearsome, Tough to Overwhelm and Fearsome. Reasoning here, Tryndamere was just a tad too difficult to deal with at level 2 and constrained the window of interaction to deal with him. Especially when cheated out with Thresh or Ramp spells, removing Tough should give mid-range decks a better shot at interacting with him and make the Barbarian King a bit less tyrannical in expeditions. Makes sense, like Tough on 9 health is quite a lot, and he already like kills pretty fast. Heart removal is very scarce in the game, so there are not a lot of ways to directly kill him in a lot of decks, especially like constructed viable ones. And this just doesn't really make him much worse, it just makes him a bit more manageable for a wider range of decks and situations where before you were a lot more helpless once again. I think this once again plays into the whole idea of keeping a card powerful, but broadening interaction points against the card to make the power level the card has less punishing without actually taking away much of the power. And just, yeah, making it more widely manageable for more decks and stuff. So yeah, I generally kind of like this philosophy that is applied here, that broadens the opportunities for interaction points, making it less of a like lottery of what is facing what, because only specific decks or specific regions and specific things can deal with a certain problem, and a lot of other alternatives are just kind of like helpless against it once you get to that point, and it's just not very fun and doesn't feel very good. Even like on a competitive level, it's better to promote interactive games and allow your players to interact with powerful things your opponent is doing on various axes. Then we have a simple change from common to rare for Battlesmith, which is aimed at expeditions, because Demacia and the Elite's archetype have been overperforming in their experience in expedition, and this is a great way to rebalance limited formats by just changing rarity. And in return, they made Silverwing Vanguard from rare to a common to kind of compensate. So it just doesn't even like change the availability of cards for that archetype in expeditions. It just puts some of the power from common to rare and some of the more like generic stuff from rare to common to slightly decrease the average power level that the archetype will have in a given expedition because you see less Battlesmith. And that card can get out of hand real hard, real fast in expedition. Next we have Fleet Feather Tracker. Basically, instead of just having Challenger, now when you summon another ally, grant me Challenger. Doesn't even have to be a Demacia ally, so basically you just need to play another Challenger after Tracker before you can Challenger. Tracker is a slightly too frequently used unit, setting a risky bar for Demacia 1-drops. Given the utility of cheap Challenger units, we are making you work a little to turn on the bird's power. Seems reasonable. Card was very good. I was a bit surprised how good it was compared to a lot of the other 1-drops. Was definitely one of the best 1-drops in the game, and it's still very good. And I think basically any deck that was playing it before, except maybe if you would have before built like a deck that was very like creature light, unit light, but would have played Tracker for like early game removal interaction, might not want to do so now anymore because it can't reliably activate Tracker, but any like unit heavier deck with Tracker will just play Tracker as much as before because it's not much worse. It's just a little less reliable, that's all. Iva Rosenhaus. It used to be a 5-cost 5/6 and now is a 5-cost 5/5, which I think is a reasonable change. 5/6 on 5 basically outmatches almost every other unit at that cost and below in terms of health, and at very worst trades, or most of the time just kind of brick wall stuff, and then at the same time grants all your allies in your deck +1/+1. And basically the reasoning they gave was like that. Houseguard was quietly one of the best things you could do in your ramp deck, a big blocker, credible attacker, and long-term value generator. We are preserving its more intangible power while reducing its health to give opposing units a better chance at going toe-to-toe with a unit that's already generating so much off-board value. So now you have more beneficial attacks into a Hearthguard than before, which seems reasonable. Like, it was hard to say how the card would be positioned in Constructed long-term, but there's also Expedition, and especially in Expedition this is pretty powerful, although it's an epic, so it's not gonna come up that often. But yeah, I can see why they made that change. Not sure how necessary it was, honestly, but I can like at least see where they're coming from. Next we have one of the more controversial ones, at least from what I've seen around the internet, since it got spoiled. Catalyst of Aeons went from 4 to 5. Catalyst just offered too much ramp and sustain at 4 mana, allowing it to consistently fit the curve. Ramp decks want on turn 3. Bumping it to 5 provides time for opposing decks to interact with the ramp deck and more room for us to add tools to ramp decks in the future. It also better differentiates Catalyst from Wielding Stones, ideally making the inclusion of both in a deck more of a choice and less of an auto-include. So the thing is basically, because you didn't often play something on 1, you basically would get a spell mana on 1 and then on 3 you could just Catalyst, gain back the health that you lost in early combat against more aggressive decks for free, and ramp from 3 to 5 and then like drop your Hearthguard, for example. Now you basically need to skip your turn 2 instead of your turn 1 to do so, or you have to wait till turn 4 to do it, to go from 4 to 6. But basically the fact that that's not just ramp, but also gains you 3 health is pretty good here, and I guess they just want to be on the more conservative side with ramp to give them more room in the future, as they said here, to add more tools to ramp. And like, I think people sometimes underestimate how powerful ramp can be, especially in a game like this where you guaranteed your mana gain each turn. So it's always ramp. It's not just like ramp if you have your land drop next turn. It's ramp period. Like, it's guaranteed putting you from say 3 to 5. not from 3 to 4. And then if you have your land drop, it actually ramped you, otherwise it just compensated for your lack of mana. So it's a much more impactful and reliable boost in these games, basically. And we've seen that in games like Hearthstone, how dominant and powerful something like Wild Growth was, which is also why we saw the Withering Stone nerf from preview patch 1 to 2 in a game where there's very limited ways to interact with Withering Stones, and the fact that it can sometimes have the upside of blocking put it on a similar power level as Wild Growth, and I guess they decided that they don't want to like end up in that situation and pushed ramp up the curve a bit. The ramp from 2 to 4 is just kind of a dangerous thing to have around and something to be careful about. We also can see this in, say, Eternal. Like, a lot of the 2-cost ramp is unit-based. There are a lot of ways to interact with them and punish them. Most of the like more reliable ramp is from 3 to 5 rather than from 2 to 4. For that reason, I guess. It's just something that I guess game designers have learned over the years, especially from Magic and the experience with Rampant Growth, where this all kind of started, and then also from stuff like Wild Growth in Hearthstone. And you also have to keep in mind, due to the spell reserve, spells have to be more expensive than normally in Runeterra, which is why Catalyst costing 5 might seem a lot at first, but it's not as much as it seems. It's more of a like 3 or 4, while before it was more of a 3. And now it's like, yeah, a 4, but still sometimes a 3 if you like stumble somewhere else in your curve, like you don't have something you want to do on 2. So it can still, depending on the game, sort of do the same thing of ramping you from 3 to 5 like before, just less consistently and at a bit higher cost. So yeah, I mean, I don't have enough of an opinion, and I think honestly no one should have that strong of an opinion of us on how necessary it was, because we only had a couple of days of preview patches where things were heavily skewed by people playing what streamers were doing, people having their biases, and we didn't really have a meta game that had time to like develop and shake out. So I think they had a lot of time to test internally, and they also have more information on what they want to potentially release in future sets, like in the next regions and stuff, that they will probably have good reasons to pull back on something like ramp to give them more design space going forward, for example. Same with Withering Stone. Apparently they felt it was still too good at 4 health, because 4 health is kind of a critical spot in Runeterra. That means you suddenly survive a lot. Some of the like cheaper interaction deals 3 damage at most, stuff like Black Spear, which is one of the better like cheap early removal in the game. A lot of the challenges are like 2 or 3 attack, like Fiora for example. So at 4 health, Withering Stone was, I guess, still really hard to kill, and they wanted Withering Stones to be more possible to interact with for a wider range of decks. Once again, we are looking at a change that's intended to open up interaction points and also make it less likely to be able to block for free while ramping you against certain strategies. So when we reduced the power of some keycards in ramp decks, during the last preview patch we gave Withering Stones a compensatory bump to its health, in addition to increasing its cost. 4 health is a significant breakpoint for surviving at least 1 combat though, especially since ramp decks should naturally fall behind early, so reverting the health component. So yeah, basically they don't want it to be as good on defense while also accelerating you, and make ramp weak early, since it gets to the late game faster and to a more powerful late game than your average deck, and that's how they want to balance it. Not sure how necessary that was, but I guess we'll find out how things play out in a couple of hours. Next we have a change to Clouddrinker. It went from 3.7 to 3.5. That's a pretty big nerf, especially for a card that so far wasn't really on anyone's radar. And then they removed the Enlightened condition. So basically Enlightened got a card and lost a card. Where at Enlightened it reduced burst spells by 2 instead of 1. And now it just does it. It just does the non-enlightened thing of reducing burst spells by 1. Clouddrinker is a dangerous combo piece. That part I agree with. Reducing cost on cards can get out of hand eventually, especially with a growing card pool. So that's always something you want to keep an eye on. They seem to be doing that. But it was doing too much by also acting as a huge blocker to defend the combo strategy. So we are reducing its health. We're also removing the super effect at Enlightened, which was risky long-term, potentially enabling infinite game-ending combos without offering much to existing Enlightened strategies. That's true, like it didn't really make that much sense in Enlightened stuff. I guess it had some nice synergy with Karma and her random spells, so it's not entirely true, I guess. I'm not sure if they are referring to combos that are already in the game, at least I don't know of any, or of combos that would be enabled with future regions coming in the next year. Once again, this might be a change aimed more at like future content than the current situation, because at least so far from what we know and people have like tried and thought of, this didn't seem particularly relevant or necessary. But yeah, they know more about what's to come than we do, and apparently there might be some crazy combos that would be a bit too good with something that reduces their cost, the cost of their combo pieces by 2, and at the same time acts as a pretty big brick wall. Then Flame Chompers got buffed back a bit. Basically, it was an 0-1 before, so it always died once you used it. Now you have the chance to maybe like take a small chump blocker that they would want to chump with, deny them the chump, and then next time do it again or take a bigger blocker that is problematic. So you might get a second use out of this in some situations. It's not gonna matter that often, I think, but it also at least isn't gonna die that easily for free to random stuff that deals 1 damage, which is also relevant. It's a pretty solid balance to settle between the 1 and the original 3. Then there are a couple of like general changes. This context covers both Back Alley Barkeep and the rest of Piltover and Zone cards below. PNZ has been struggling in expeditions, and we've got some buffs to some specific underperforming cards that should increase PNZ's consistency in expeditions without undue impact outside the mode. So basically they just increase the rate a bit, above the rate on a bunch of PNZ cards that are more relevant to expedition, like commons and rares, which are effectively uncommons for like people coming from Eternal Magic and stuff like that. So this went from a 2-2 to a 3-2. This also went to a 3-2. This went from a 4-2 to a 5-2, which seems reasonable for a 5-drop. The biggest change actually is Boom Crew Rookie. It went from a 0 power to a 1 power unit. So it used to be a 2-cost 0-4 that deals 2 damage to the enemy Nexus on attack. And now it's effectively, like, if not blocked, a 3-4 for 2, which is actually pretty impressive. And even if it gets blocked, it survives a lot of like early and mid-game blockers, and even now deals some damage to them, so it's not like free to block. So yeah, this card could even become interesting in Constructor in the long run now, because sure, it's like not as good in creature combat than a 3-4, but just like the virtual thing and the fact that you can't block the 2 damage, and maybe even ways to multiply these or whatever, could be pretty interesting. Like overall, a 2-cost 1/4 that deals 2 damage on attack is a pretty good rate, and now the card actually looks like it could be at a constructed power level. So that's something to keep in mind. That's actually like the one change that might impact constructed. And then they changed Parade Electric from a 3/3 to a 2/4, which is, I guess, a bit of a buff, since higher health means it's more likely to support more than once, which is kind of the primary purpose of the card. But yeah, still don't think the card's particularly relevant to constructed, but it's a bit better at doing its support job, which I guess makes sense. Then Plaza Guardian went from a 5/5 to a 6/6. That's another change that seems potentially relevant to constructed. Spell decks, also with the change to Ezreal and nerfs from the second preview patch, don't seem that hot right now, but if they become viable, especially with future releases, this card just got a reasonable amount better, because now it at 6/6 lines up so much better against a lot of the medium-sized constructed units that this is pretty nice on offense and defense. So yeah, this is a change that might come in handy down the line. And some Snipe Scavenger went from a 4/2 to a 4/3. Like a 4/2 at 4 was just too fragile, and now at 4/3 it just plays a bit better for what it does. Still not a great card though, but at least not as bad. And yeah, used Cask Salesman, another one that went from a 2/2 to a 3/2. I like those changes, like these 2/2s, especially for like 3 or 4 power with some utility, which is pretty weak, and now as 3/2s they at least do a decent amount of work. And yeah, here the Rekindler, when I'm summoned, revive the strongest allied champion. It went from a 5/5 to a 4/4, which seems very reasonable. The card seems pretty powerful. It's a pretty strong 2-for-1 that also generates tempo, because you get the champion without having to pay the mana cost, which is super strong. Just a straightforward power reduction. Getting a champion back doesn't need to come with quite so strong a body. For the cost, we've also adjusted the text for clarity. That makes sense, I agree. Card is still pretty powerful. And last we have Racecaller, which went from 4/2 to a 4/3 fearsome. So that's also a lot better. So they want to promote like a heavy Shadow Isles Racecaller strategy a bit more. This card went from meh to looking pretty good all of a sudden. So yeah, maybe there's something there. Probably not a top tier deck, but pretty decent. And especially in Expedition, this card got a whole lot better. Especially if you pick also get a couple of like actual Mist Wraith. And then they have a watch list. Basically deny an elusive. And as they say here, deny is a key card that helps keep Legends of Runeterra an interactive game, but its sheer efficiency can also create the opposite effect, making it hard to interact favorably against decks that play it. This is obviously the whole point of deny, but it can be particularly problematic in conjunction with strategies that demand prompt interaction in order to survive, such as elusive heavy builds. We are currently exploring potential changes to deny that would maintain its role, but in a more balanced way. One option is increasing deny's mana cost, but there are obviously significant implications to bringing it out of the can be cast with only spell mana range. Regarding those previously mentioned elusive strategies, we've seen them be quite strong, though not definitely out of line. But it's difficult to identify exactly which cards are potentially problematic. Just removing elusive from units doesn't necessarily help, since the keyword actually increases in power if it appears less frequently across competitive decks. Less incentive to bring the right removal and fewer elusive blockers. We are continuing to keep watch and will take exploratory action if we 1. Determine it's necessary, and 2. Find a good candidate through internal testing. So they're basically working on it. I can see that making sense. My impression was like some of the cheaper elusive units, like the 2/1/2 and the 3/2/2, were pretty pushed and pretty strong, and potentially a bit broken in the right kind of strategies, as you could have seen from some of my deck decks, especially the Z aggro, which was heavily leaning on those elusive units to just close out the game and leave your opponent kind of helpless. And Deny obviously is like particularly good at protecting that plan, but also just generally very good at doing a lot of things in this game. And since it's such a unique effect, there's not a lot of counterplay against it in a way. So sure, it itself is counterplay, but there's not really much room to counterplay Deny itself. So yeah, we'll see what they come up with and what they decide. But it's nice that they give us this like additional information and heads up, so we know where the head's at. Yeah, and just some visual update stuff. Nothing like relevant for this review. Once again, link will be in the description down below, so you can check it out. But I wanted to talk about the economy updates real quick. All in all, there are a couple of changes to the coins. Basically, champion wildcards got a bit more expensive. Basically, for $10 you used to get 3 champion wildcards and 45% of one. Now you get 3 champion wildcards and 33% of one, so you basically lost like 12% points and a little bit extra on your $10 purchase. Then a couple of like other reward stuff that I'm not that interested in. The part that I was interested in talking about basically is the XP breakdown, since there's something that I think is kind of problematic and I hope they change. So first win bonus, you get 400 bonus XP for your first PvP win each day, 200 for the second, 100 for the third, and then the base PvP win XP now is 200 from 250, so they lowered it, but gave us a bit extra upfront, which is nice, makes the game less grindy, is better for people that can't play like a shit ton like us streamers and content creators, which is a good change. And from losses, it went from 25 XP to 100, but that's the base XP. Then we get into diminishing XP rewards over many hours, which is actually not that many hours if you ask me. So from 11th to 15th win, the XP go down from 200 to 150. Then in the next 5 wins, they go down to 100. And then for the next 10, they go down to 50. But after 30 wins, you get 0 XP. And they tell us to like get some sleep and come back tomorrow, you maniac. But we all know, for us grinders here and content creators and streamers that play a lot, 30 wins is really not that much. Like on a day where you play a lot, reach that like halfway through the amount you play that day. Like it's really just not that much, especially if you play a fast deck. Like if you play an aggro deck that plays quick games, these 30 wins are not a whole lot. They take, I don't know, 2-3 hours maybe. Really not that much, especially if you play concentrated and like jam game after game. I really don't like the general notion of indirectly punishing people or disincentivizing people to play your game. I get that they need to like pull back on XP to like keep people from running away with the free content too much. But I think we should get a base amount of XP permanently, like so that it doesn't feel bad for like playing after these 30 wins. Like I don't want to feel kind of bad playing Runeterra after I got my 30 wins. That's just not a good incentive, I think. 25 XP would make sense from the 50 XP. If they say 25 is too much, sure, fine, give us like 10 XP. But at least give us some tangible amount, like 5 XP would be too low, I think, but like somewhere between 10 and 25, depending on what they think would be acceptable, would be good. I just think it's really bad to have 0 XP, especially this quickly. Like, sure, they argue here, where did I say that? XP doesn't, reduced win XP doesn't set in until 11 wins in a day, which is on average about 20 games, or 3 hours and 20 minutes of daily play. Like, yeah, 20 games is not gonna take 3 hours and 20 minutes, depending on what deck you play and how fast you play. And also, it depends on how high your win rate is. Like, if you win a lot, you're already like halfway through your daily win XP. That's just, yeah, not cool for someone that plays a lot of hours a day. It's just, I'm not happy about this. And it's even worse with losses. Like, the initial article had losses up to 20 losses, and they revised it, posted a new article, and now it says, from the 5th loss on, instead of the 100 XP, you only get half, 50, and after 10 losses, you get nothing. That's fine. I understand that. They don't want people to just like concede their way through their regions, which makes sense. It would make the game in like non-ranked queues pretty miserable. So that makes a lot of sense. But I think since winning isn't something you can control in the sense that you can just deliberately scoop over and over to get XP, I think that's where they can do something, like just give us a base amount of XP for wins permanently, so we don't get sort of punished for keep playing Runeterra. It's just, I just don't like that. And then we have some other like stuff versus AI, to be honest. That doesn't matter too much. Like most of us don't want to like jam against the AI anyway. So if the XP fall off there eventually, most people won't reach these thresholds anyway, I think. So yeah, that's my big gripe here. I really hope they fix this and add a like minimum base amount of XP that you get for every win, no matter how long you play, and then I would be happy. Otherwise, the changes seem nice and reasonable. It's nice to get more for losses, but have like a point where you don't get anything for losses anymore, just to avoid abuse. And the front loading of XP is also very healthy to make the game less grindy. So, but you can make the game less grindy while still giving people a little bit, if they have the time and the desire to grind anyway. You don't have to like take away grinding completely when you make the game less grindy. So yeah, I hope they change that. Let me know in the comments what you think. Same about like all the card reviews and opinions that I shared. I'll obviously get a better handle on the game once it's out, once we play more, once we see how the metagame shakes up, which decks are good and so on. But you can follow me on that journey on my stream, which you can find in the description down below or over here on the screen. twitch.tv/ManuS_CCG. And yeah, hope to see as many of you guys there. And I'm super excited for the game. So let's get on this. And yeah, that's it again for this time. I'm your host ManuS. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.